Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to ELPC Thinks. I'm Howard Lerner. I'm the Executive Director of the Environmental Law and Policy Center, and this is the forum by which we bring together public officials, experts, environmental leaders, and with Representative Eric Sorensen, we have all those put together. A quick heads up, we're recording this webinar and streaming live on Facebook so we can share it with people who weren't able to join us this afternoon. And today we're honored to have with us Representative Eric Sorensen from Illinois' Congressional District number 17. Representative Sorensen was born and raised in Rockford, Illinois. For over 2 decades, he served as a TV meteorologist in central and northern Illinois. He really knows weather, climate issues well. He's a meteorologist. He knows his stuff. Congressman Sorensen was elected in 2022. He serves on the Agricultural Committee and the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, where he's the ranking member of the Space and Aeronautics Subcommittee. So welcome, Representative Sorensen. I'm glad you could join us today. Talk a little bit, if you would, about your priorities, what you see in Washington as the things you're really going to focus on in your first term in Congress.
Well, Howard, thank you for putting this together, bringing us all together to talk about something so important as, how we communicate the things that are most important to us. And thank you to the Environmental Law and Policy Center for everything that you do.
Thank you.
As you said, for a couple of decades, I stayed in one place. You see, as a kid, I really only wanted one job. And that was to be the meteorologist at WREX Channel 13 in Rockford, Illinois.
Well, you achieved everything you wanted as a kid.
I know. And so, here's the thing is, I went to school to NIU in DeKalb and got my bachelor's science degree. I worked down in Texas for a few years. But, a few things happened when I was there in the 4.5 years. I chased tornadoes. I was in a hurricane once. 0 out of 10. I would not recommend that. I was in the newsroom in Tyler, Texas, the morning of 9/11. So I felt like I was on a different planet from every one of my family members. And I was also in Tyler, Texas, a couple of years later when we had the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. I remember the sonic boom from when the space shuttle broke up that Saturday morning. I remember every instance after that. And for me being a scientist, that was really hard. I couldn't explain, the things that I was feeling, but I knew I needed to get home. And so I had an opportunity to take a drastic pay cut to move back home to Rockford. And guess what? Here I was, the meteorologist on WREX Channel 13 in Rockford. And so I got to work there for more than a decade, and then for almost a decade in the next TV market over in Moline, Illinois, which coincidentally is in the same congressional district.
There you are.
And that's where I think, my calling came from. We were going through a pandemic, where so many people were getting bad information. I think of this early on, Howard, and for those of you, think about it at the beginning. I was wearing masks, we were social distancing, we were washing, we were making sure that I didn't see my folks. I didn't want them to get this virus. And I remember feeling so enraged at my neighbors who were so flippant about this. Do you not understand the science? But here was the thing. I realized me being mad at my neighbor doesn't help the situation. All right, we have to understand that, my neighbors were making a bad decision based on bad information that was going into their equation. How do we fix that? We make sure that we change the equation. We have to make sure that we've got good information coming in. And that's where I said, if not me, who? I need to run for Congress, even though we haven't had a meteorologist in Congress for 50 years.
Talk a little bit about that, would you? You're now a new congressman. You won. Congratulations. And you are the first meteorologist in Congress in 50 years. How do you bring science to your job? How do you use your meteorological background to be more persuasive with members both on the Democratic side and on the Republican
Yeah.
side?
I got some really great advice from our Illinois Senator, Dick Durbin. And the day after I won my election, I said, could you give me some advice? And he said, well, I will give you some advice here, Eric, because the clock's already ticking. All right. He said, you were elected. And between your election and your swearing in, it's a small window of opportunity. And this is the opportunity where you have to build the relationships with those on the other side of the aisle. I said, okay, challenge accepted. And so a couple of weeks either side of Thanksgiving of last year during new member orientation, I went and I sat at the table for breakfast with the people I didn't recognize. Those were the people that weren't going to be the Democrats. These were the Republicans. I just had a name tag on that said Eric Sorensen, Illinois 17. And so these Republicans, they would say, oh, Eric, where's Illinois 17? And I said, this is Rockford, Peoria, Moline, and Bloomington, Illinois. I said, this is far away from Chicago. In fact, my house is a mile from the Mississippi River in Iowa. And I said, I was the weatherman in the district for 20 years. No way. And I said, yeah, guys. And I was also the one that was talking to farmers about climate change. And so we shared a chuckle as if that was a one-liner, as if that was a joke. But then I said, hey, guys, it's not a joke. I said, when you tell farmers and people in agriculture that climate change is a hoax, they all know you're lying to them. And all of these Republicans across the table went pale. And I said, but here's the thing, guys. I said, I came to Congress without the background, without the political baggage. I said, I didn't even carry a carry-on here, okay? I want to be able to use science and data and values to find the best ways to solve the problem. And I'm like, that's where we need bipartisanship. You know, we're not going to get anywhere if we're just arguing about how much humans are causing climate to change. You know, let's get beyond that and just say what's better for our kids, what's better for the next generation, and let's do that. And what's great is I have really good relationships with about half a dozen members on the Republican side, and we text and we share information. It's Eric, how do I talk about carbon sequestration? I don't know what it is. Or how do we make farmers understand, you know, or our growers in Florida dealing with more frequent hurricanes? How do we get what they need? Right. So that's already in progress. I mean, these are not things that you're going to hear on the news. You're not going to read it in the Post or the Times, because these are relationships that happen one-on-one.
So talk a little bit about, you know, farmers. You're on the Agriculture Committee. So how does that work? As the Agriculture Committee, which historically has been pretty bipartisan, you're dealing with farm policy, both large and small. How do you bring your experience, your expertise as a scientist, as a meteorologist, to your fellow committee members? How do you make that work?
Right. I think, Howard, it goes back to, when the tornado happened or the damage happened, I would frequently, if I had time, I would frequently go and visit with the people that had the roof blown off their house. And so I got to know people, you know, and I got to know the people that were impacted in my community. I got through that whole process, became friends with the people in ag. I look at the district that I'm in, the thing that connects us is agriculture.
Absolutely.
2 miles from my house is the headquarters of Deere and Company. You know, John Deere, his hometown was Moline, Illinois. And, you know, his company dates back to 1844. So we need to make sure that we are following science, that we're using data, because that's what our farmers are going to need. Everybody knows it's harder for a farmer today, even with all the technology and the innovation, than it was in the past. And how do we know that? Because a lot of these farmers, they've got the weather records that go back to the early 1900s. And it's really fascinating to me as a meteorologist, and I get to see these pages going back so long. And so farmers know that things are changing, that there's a different deck of cards. And so we have to use innovation and technology to our advantage. It might sound counterintuitive or a bad political decision for me to drive my Chevy Bolt onto a corn farmer's farm to meet with them. Because when you think about what is a farmer in Northern Illinois doing, they're growing the corn, which is supplementing the gasoline with ethanol that's not going into my gas tank. But here's the thing, is when I'm able to talk with farmers to say, I'm talking with the Boeing Corporation, such that the next generation of 737 will be able to utilize sustainable biofuels, because we haven't done anything with respect to our environment in aviation.
And there's a win-win.
Right. And then, I think, Howard, then it's the farmer understands that I'm working for them. That's what sustainability is. Sustainability isn't just some green word. It's really sustainability in time. It's sustainability in jobs. And so that right there is how we move things forward. And we bust the political and partisan divide of climate and politics. It's by talking about sustainability, because that conversation works.
How do you see, we've at ELPC, we've worked on a program called the Rural Energy for America program. That's about getting more solar, wind power, energy efficiency on small and medium-sized farms, ranches, small businesses. It's always struck me to be a win-win-win. It's good for farmers, it's good for job creation, it's good for the rural economy, and I'll add one more, it's very good for the environment. How much interest do you see in that? Do you see more coming, or is it a tough sell?
Here's the thing. Back when I was running for Congress, since I was the meteorologist, the logo of our campaign dotted the little lowercase I with a sun, and I got a wind turbine.
Now I remember that. Okay.
Right. So Howard, I had I don't remember if it was somebody in the DC Beltway had said, oh, Eric Sorensen, he thinks that he's got a windmill on his logo. How out of touch can he be from middle America? Here's the thing, is that person in Washington, D.C. hasn't been to Western Illinois, hasn't seen the hundreds and hundreds of wind turbines that we have. Also hasn't seen my Mid-American energy bill, where we're up to like 78% renewable at my house, right? And so they don't understand that. I gave a speech to farmers at the Peoria County Farm Bureau about a month ago, maybe a month and a half now. And it was I think my team thought it was going to be a tough assignment for me, because it was, Eric, they're having a whole morning about putting solar on farms, and you're going to be the one to kick it off. I said, okay, I can do that. And so I walked up there and I stood in front of, there was probably about 75 farmers. Okay. And I said, hi, everybody. I'm your congressman. I'm your meteorologist. And first and foremost, I want to tell you, if anybody ever tells you to put a solar panel up on a perfectly good piece of farmland, I want you to tell them where to go and tell them how to get there. And that was what got their attention. And I said, but here is the most important piece. You all know your fields. You know where it's
what's marginal.
Yeah, you know where it's marginal. You know where it's too soft to plant. You know where you get poor runoff. Those are the areas I want you to think about solar, because those are the areas that are marginal, and those are going to supplement when we don't get a good harvest. Okay. And so think about that. We have to be smarter. We have to work smarter, not harder. And when you tell farmers that you're all in on that, they understand it. They understand how you work smarter, not harder. And it really resonated with this group. I got so many thank yous afterwards because they knew I was being honest with them. And I'll never forget walking out the door to my chief of staff who was on the phone working on the next meeting, and he goes, "Eric, what the heck? It's only been like 2 minutes. You were slated for 15 minutes." And I said, "I didn't need any more time. I didn't need any more time because I got the point across."
And since I know your chief of staff, he grabbed those extra 13 minutes right away. He did his job. He did his job. Speaking of communications and, different types of area in your district, the Driftless Area.
Yeah.
The Driftless Area, a unique 4-state area, the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge, the rolling hills, the landscape, in the Galena area and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see opportunities to better protect the Driftless Area and the National Wildlife and Fish Refuge through the Farm Bill? How are you going to go about doing that?
Well, first things first. So the Driftless Area is a unique place. It's where northern Illinois almost turns mountainous, and it's far removed of Chicago, northwestern side. If you've ever been to Galena, Illinois, it's an absolutely beautiful community to visit. These areas did not have the glaciers. The glaciers, they moved through and solidified the land so that we can grow. Okay, but in these areas, it's harder because it's hillier. There are so many more rocks and boulders, and it's harder to farm. And so we understand that there are bigger challenges in these areas than there are in Western Illinois. And so it does require more attention than the regional conservation program can give them. And so I'm working across the aisle with Congresswoman Ashley Hinson from Iowa 2 to kind of build on the successes that we've had in the past in the Driftless Area, with the goal of improving the quality of life for our farmers, reducing the flash flood risk. We've had 100-year-old bridges and culverts that have been washed away because we're getting these summertime thunderstorms, and we have to make sure that these areas are resilient. And to be honest with you, this is where our climate's changing is already having such an impact because we're forced to advocate more and appropriate more out of our federal budget, to sustain. And sustainability isn't going to be cheap. And that's why, every dollar that I believe that Congress appropriates, having the power of the purse, has to be an investment in the future.
And thank you, along with Representative Hinson, for co-sponsoring what some people call DELC 2.0, the Driftless Area Land Conservation Initiative. It was begun during the Obama administration, very successful. Suffice it to say, the Trump administration didn't continue it. It's a good time to get it back going for the 4-state Driftless Area. And for folks who don't know, it's called the Driftless Area because, as the congressman was saying, the glaciers didn't drift there and flatten everything out. It was driftless. And great trout streams, wonderful outdoor recreation. The 4 state DNRs, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, and Illinois, called the Driftless Area the most important area in terms of wildlife habitat and wildlife in the entire Midwest. It really is a special area, and you have the both honor and responsibility of representing the people and the communities within the unique Driftless Area, which is terrific. Speaking of climate communications, you're on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. How do you use your meteorologist expertise, your climate communications expertise effectively on that committee? It is a science and technology committee.
Yeah, this is, I don't want to say it's my favorite.
The congressperson, you have to have many favorites.
I have 2 children. One is
same point.
And the other one is named Science, and I can't say that one is a favorite.
Very clever.
But here's the thing: is space science and technology. It's a place where we can set aside our politics and we utilize our science. I was really worried going into Congress, being in science, that I was going to be arguing basic science principles, with some that just choose not to understand. But one of my mentors and colleagues, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, I believe is just wonderful. And she said, Eric, she goes, we need your life experience as a meteorologist. We need your years of communication in science to be in this committee, because this is the committee where we work across the aisle, and we have 100% bipartisanship rate in Congress.
Wow.
We all so far have voted 100% with one another because we utilize data and science to our benefit. And that's what's really wonderful. And as a freshman member, I am the ranking member on space. And so I will tell you, one of the greatest things so far that's happened to me in Congress was when I was able to bring an astronaut to my district, to Moline, Illinois, to first inspire college students in science, to go to a high school and talk with them about science, but then do a second grade. Okay, I had the assistant principal say, Eric, why didn't you this is Mr. Eric, and he's going to explain what he does for you in Congress.
Love it.
So I didn't have an answer to that prepared. I would be more prepared in the subcommittee on space, talking about, the atmospheric physics on Mars. But anyway, I just said, boys and girls, I live in the neighborhood of this school, Hamilton School. I said, I live down the street from you, but I work in the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. And my job is to make sure that you can do whatever you want to do when you grow up. And when you think about it, that is all Congress's job should be. And so I said, I want to introduce you to my friend, Dr. Kate Rubins, who has blasted off on 2 rockets. And she has spent 300 days in space. And then she was able to talk with these kids about what did it mean to go to space, to launch on a rocket. And I realized as I was listening to her that all of these second graders are going to remember this. They're going to be inspired. And, when we think about where we're going to go to Mars, the first person that's going to set foot on Mars is probably in a second grade classroom today. That's why we have this. And
that is really cool. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way. I bet most people haven't either. You know what? Let me see if we can open this up to some of the questions that have been coming through the chat box. Our friend Dave Kraft asks what your take is on agrivoltaics. Anything going on in Illinois about this? Any help from the Biden administration?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I do not know that. I'm not an expert on that. So certainly that's going to be something I'll have to do.
We don't do the fake it till you make it here. That answer is fair and legit.
I learned from doing television weather for 22 years. I'm not going to fake it. If I don't know, I'm going to communicate. You know what? I'm not real clear on what's going to happen this weekend, but tune in tomorrow.
I'm with you. Amy Buska has a question. This one I know you know something about. She asks if you can talk a little bit more about Boeing and ethanol and other potential uses for ethanol. Big issue, as you know, in Northeast Iowa. Any sort of further comments and thoughts you have on that?
Right. I mean, first and foremost, our number one goal is we've got to decarbonize our energy. We need to decarbonize our way of life. Understanding today that it is a step-by-step process. For instance, understanding that John Deere and what they're doing with crop science, and understanding that now we're able to put a seed in the ground. Okay, and when that seed goes in the ground, we can encapsulate it with the fertilizer that seed needs, instead of going back utilizing fossil fuels to go through a farm field a second or a third time, or needing a crop duster to come down. what we can do is make sure that we're encapsulating the seed in the plant itself. And what that does is it helps us meet our goals, because quite frankly, John Deere's having a hard time figuring out how to decarbonize their tractors. Their tractors are so large, and Harvester Works is in East Moline, Illinois, and you get to see how big these machines are. That if we were to make these just battery powered, the batteries would be so heavy they would just sink right through the ground. And so what we've got to do is use our technology and our innovation to make it so that we're utilizing this equipment less, right? So we don't have to make the passes. And so, I think that for a broader perspective, all heavy duty transportation, needs to be rethought. Sustainable aviation is so important. And we've seen a lot of the commercial air carriers, make their goals. If they're going to meet their goals, we're going to need farmers. Farmers are going to be the hero in this, whether they can see it yet today or not. And so, I look to alternative energy to lower the costs. And, that's why, we need the meteorologist to be able to talk about the science and help it make sense for people.
Speaking of which, there's a question from Ian Champ about the use of marginal cropland. Mm-hmm. What's your sense on the competing demands when it comes to protecting prime farmland? Is that a federal responsibility, a state responsibility, or an individual landowner responsibility? How do we protect, our wonderful prime farmland?
Right. And when I think of marginal farmland, at least in my district, a lot of the marginal farmland is wet. These are areas,
or it's rocky and going up a hill in the driftless area.
Right. I really am advocating for a resiliency of our floodplain, making sure that is there. Also making sure that if there's a buffer area, that we can help to trap some of the nitrogen so it doesn't get into our streams and waterways. I think that's important. But as far as the responsibility, I think that this is an ability for us to work together, whether that's with the state's DNR, with the Army Corps of Engineers, with the state and the federal resources to make sure that, when we talk about sustainability, that it's there for that next generation. And we have to, we owe it to our kids and their grandkids to do better than we did before.
Along the same lines, Congressman, Mary Ann Miller is asking about, she's a county soil and water conservation district member. How are you looking at the Farm Bill in 2023 on the Ag Committee is better incentivizing conservation practices? In other words, how do we not, rip up prime farmland? What can be done to provide incentives to protect prime farmland and, use marginal land for other purposes? And, is the Farm Bill a vehicle to do some of that? What are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, it's understanding, what our needs are going to be as we go forward. And no matter what a farmer tells you about their politics, I think everyone is a conservationist. Everyone wants to do the best for the land. And who best to know this than the farmer, getting their hands dirty. And so it's making sure that as we go forward, I want to see, with the cost of fertilizer that's going up, for instance, these input costs for farmers that go up. What I want to do is lower these input costs. And like what I was just talking about, if we can encapsulate that one kernel of corn, that one piece of seed that's going in the ground with enough of the nutrients that it needs, we're not wasting. We're not going to see the runoff of nitrogen.
No, we're being more efficient.
Yeah, right. And it's better for the bottom line, right?
Look, farmers save money. The public avoids pollution. Right. Everything's more efficient. That's good for the environment. It reduces the amount of nutrients in the water system. That means a better ecology. It avoids some of our climate problems. That's I think I got about 5 wins in there. You probably added another one.
I was going to say, I think outside of our region a lot too. It means that the shrimp boat captain down in the Gulf Coast
Right.
isn't going to see his crop die off. It's going to mean that the shrimp boat captain is going to have a good crop of shrimp. And so it goes beyond where we live. And that's why, the soil and conservation districts are so crucial. Because, I think that, each of us is a rock in this dam, right? And each of us is holding back that water.
We're moving to wrap up. So, you get the closing words. What happened? We talked about that you want to make sure that the 60, 70 people on this webinar know and understand.
One thing is, for me, it may be a surprise for people to understand that I am optimistic and I'm energetic, even though I'm a freshman in the minority in Congress. We have great work that's being done that no one's going to know about. All we're talking about is the debt ceiling today. But we're not talking about the relationships. We're not talking about the 100% bipartisanship that we have in the Science Committee, or the fact that it was all but one voter one member in the Agriculture Committee last week. We were almost 100% bipartisan there too. And the great thing is that the people believed that we were going to be better off with a meteorologist in Congress. And so now it's my job to work as hard as I can across the aisle. I had a Republican speak to me last week, and she goes, "Gosh, Eric, I'm just glad that you're a meteorologist and not a politician talking to us about science and climate." And I said, "You're right." I said, because we don't need any more of that. And so it's going to be my job, to work in the center of the aisle, in the Midwest, the center of the nation, so that we're moving forward. And if we're successful, if all of us are working as hard as we can, then the forecast is going to be good.
That's terrific. And that's a great note to end on. Congressman, congrats on your first term in Congress. You have an ambitious agenda, but that's good.
Yeah.
We want that. And thank you for all you're doing and all you'll be doing more for the driftless area, for smart farm policy, for renewable energy, for climate solutions. Having a meteorologist in Congress, it ought to happen more than once in 50 years. And
I'm trying to recruit.
You're recruiting. Next thing you'll be doing is reaching out to Tom Skilling to run, who I greatly admire and like a lot. You're probably a better candidate. Thank you for all you're doing. Let's stay in touch, and join us, everyone, for the next ELPC Thinks webinar. And feel free to pass along the post on Facebook of this to friends and others who might want to see it. Thank you very much, Congressman, for all you're doing. Take care.
Thank you, Howard. Be well, everyone.